Hey guys, how's it going? I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, Taka actually has a video on a dev blog out within like a day of the blog posting to the union. I know, I'm amazed at myself. I'm actually ahead of the game for a moment. But this is a dev blog that I know a lot of people are going to be really excited about and have some information in here a lot of people are going to be interested in. So I wanted to jump on this one as quickly as possible. So with that little intro out of the way, let's talk about the art of war in Anno 117 Pax Romana. Now, obviously, it's not a secret anymore. Everybody knows land combat is making its wonderful return in Anno 117. Naval combat, of course, isn't going anywhere. We still have naval combat. That is just a core part of Anno with your ships and everything, but we do get our land units back to wage war on our neighbors. Now, before they even start talking about the combat itself, there is an interesting little section right here, a little blurb that I know that they put in to try and quell some of the what's the best word to use for this? The fighting. Just to boil it down to what it is, the fighting and the arguing amongst the community regarding combat. For whatever reason, anything regarding land combat seems to bring out a lot of tense emotions with people. And I know it's just because people are very, very passionate about this game and what they think the game should have in it and what they think it should not. And I get that. I do. I'm very passionate about the game and what I think it should have and what it shouldn't. People know me very well, especially on the Annoverse Discord. I have gotten into a few, tense discussions, for lack of better words, with a few people about combat in the game in the past and everything. And that's just, the nature of us being human beings and things that we, really enjoy in life and the direction that we want to see video games that we really enjoy, how they are developed and where they go with them. I think this little blurb is just trying to bring that temperature down a little bit because, people do get a little on edge about it all and everything. But anyways, let's see what they do say. So Anno and warfare. Anno games have always had a warfare component, as we know, ever since 1602. Land combat was introduced. It was very, very simple, honestly. But there was land combat and naval combat, of course. So from the very inception of the Anno series, there has been warfare. Of course, it has changed in scope and design from game to game. But they very much believe that it is an important feature for the game. And that's a key word. That's some key stuff right there. That is a warfare component in Anno that they believe is an important feature. This next paragraph is what might set a few people bristling, but it is what it is. At the same time, Anno games are builder games. The main fascination and therefore the focus that they put in terms of development is coming from discovering the world, settling new islands, building ever-growing cities, and all the logistics and production required to support it. I think that's really key right there. The developers acknowledge that they want warfare to be in the game. They think it's an important feature, it's an important component, but it's also not the focus. Warfare is not the focus, but it is a key component, and I agree with that. I agree that combat should be a focus. It shouldn't be the core focus of the game. The game is a city building game, and the combat is fun, but I don't think it should ever be the core focus. But we should always have some combat. I would never want an Anno game that has no combat whatsoever. That would be boring to me. But I also don't want them to sacrifice, the city building aspect and development on the city building aspect in order just to have better combat. Does that make sense? And I hope I may have lost a few of you on that one right there, and I understand if I did, but that's just that. Of course, that is my opinion on it, and that's what I'm going to say on that. That's my opinion on it. I want there to be combat in the game, but I also don't want it to be a core focus, and I don't want it to take away from the development of the rest of the game. Now, they do state that they understand that they have a player base with strongly differing views on the topic. How important is warfare? How should it be mandatory? How is it implemented? Should there be land combat? And so on. In short, it's a discussion that's been happening both in their team as well as in the community for many years already. Back in 1800s early days, at the time creative director Dirk wrote a great blog on the tradition of military in Anno games. That link that they have in the blog right here, I'm actually going to have down in the description. It is a really good dev blog from the early days of Anno 1800s development. I've read it multiple times. Has a lot of good information on there, so go check that out. So with that little blurb of hopefully trying to, satisfy both sides of the aisle, as it were, they actually do start getting into some of the more combat-related stuff. Now they have a short section about naval units here. We've already covered naval units here on the channel with the dev blog and everything about naval units. Just as a quick recap, naval units in Anno 117, there are 3 types of ships. There was a pentaconter, a trireme, and a quadrireme type ship. No, it doesn't relate to the number of oars. Some history buffs really got angry about that, and I had people screaming at me in comments on YouTube. Guys, it's a video game. I know triremes have 3 rows of oars, and quadriremes have, 4 rows of oars. Yes, I understand the number of oars relates to the name of the ship. That's not what they did in this game, okay? The pentaconter is the tiny ship, a trireme is your mid-sized ship, and the quadrireme is the largest type of ship. That's how they did it. You have a small, medium, and large ship, and then that's just what they're calling them, and then you modify them depending on what you need, either a trade ship or a trade ship with some defenses on it, or just a military ship, or however you want to do it. You get to design your ships and everything based on those 3 classes of ships. So again, that dev blog came out a while back. We covered it here on the channel. The link to that will also be down in the description below, as well as popping up in the right-hand corner of your screen right now in a card. All right, here's the stuff that you guys are really wanting to see and you're wanting to hear some more about. The land combat. There's going to be 4 types of units: infantry, ranged, cavalry, and artillery, with their own recruitment buildings each. Since this is an Anno game, of course, we have to produce the materials that the troops need to be trained with. The auxilia, which are medium infantry spears, require simply weapons, which you'll set up a production chain for weapons with a furnace, a weaponsmith, and then iron and coal. Legionaries, on the other hand, also require armor to produce, so you'll have to set up an armor production chain in order to produce legionaries. You start with auxilia as well as archers, and then other units can be researched from the technology tree. The discovery tree also allows for upgrades like boosting unit morale, attack against formations, and accuracy. So it comes with all kinds of different buffs and stuff throughout the technology tree to help your units get even stronger. Now they're using a basic rock, paper, scissors system with the game. While they don't go into detail and spell it out, based on my long experience with, these types of games, most likely auxilia, which are your spear infantry, are good against cavalry. Cavalry are probably best against archers, and then legionaries are best against spears. Most likely that's it right there. And then archers are probably going to be good against spears. Would that be right? Spears counter cavalry. Cavalry counters archers. Archers counter legionaries. And legionaries counter spears? Would that make sense? Oh God. I just tried to use say, oh, I know what I'm talking about. And now I'm not sure. My brain is fried today, guys. But anyways, they're using the rock, paper, scissors system basically with, hard counters for, different types of units. Then, of course, there's artillery. Scorpios are really, really accurate, and they're great against individual units, which makes sense. They were highly feared on the battlefield and everything because of the bolts that they would shoot out and everything. Very, very powerful weapons. Onagers, which are catapults, are really good at destroying buildings and fortifications and towers and stuff. So it's a simple system, but it's a system that works. Why reinvent the wheel when the rock, paper, scissors system has been around since time immemorial and it works? Tried and true system, stick with it, we're good. So you're going to want a mix of units and stuff in your army in order to have good counters and everything. In addition to units' health, there is also a morale component to units now, which is something brand new. If morale becomes too low, units can flee, and fleeing units affect nearby comrades, potentially leading to a larger rout. So this is very similar to the Total War games with the morale system. Units in Total War games have morale There's different levels of morale. They don't go into detail here, so I don't know if legionaries have more morale than an archer. I would imagine so. If, we're trying to be at least somewhat consistent, I would imagine, a heavily armored cavalry unit is going to have a little bit more morale than just a lightly armored archer. I don't know. I'm going to assume that there's different morale levels for different types of units just based on common sense, I guess you could say. So it's really cool to see some more interesting mechanics coming in for the land combat units being returned with Anno 117, other than just, here's some units, go let them hit each other with sticks and swords and, then go back to doing whatever you're doing while they're sitting there hitting each other. There's actually a little bit of strategy involved now that you have to think about while you're attacking or defending. So how does everything connect in together? So there's various synergies. Both naval and land units will be needed to bring down your opponents. The villa is now the primary main objective on the island. When you first settle an island, or you settle any island, you place down your trading post, but before you can build anything on the island, you do have to build a villa. So the villa is now the main target of, what you have to go for to take out in order to take over an island, or what your enemies are going to come for your island and they're going to be targeting. They're going to be heading for that villa. So you want to make sure your villa is heavily defended against attack. Your ships also act as your transports, so you'll be loading up your troops into your different ships, taking them, and in a scene which is probably be very reminiscent to Gladiator 2, you're going to be coming in to the enemy island with your fleet of ships loaded up with all your troops, launching those archers and all those catapults and onagers and scorpions at their walls and their troops on the wall. Or no, they're not going to be on the walls. This is not Total War, but they'll be behind the walls, and you can launch arrows and stuff at them and try to take any of them out on the land, and then you're going to beach, unload your troops, keep attacking with your ships, sending your troops in. It should be absolutely glorious. Of course, there are defensive structures, basic wooden palisades and towers, as well as upgraded stone walls and towers. Again, nothing much to talk about here. Basic stuff that you would expect to see when you're having land combat, again, is having some defensive structures. Then, of course, there is the economic part of the whole system. Naval and land units, of course, cost resources and money to be built and recruited, and they cost money and maintenance. And as we have heard in the past, however, some of you may be watching and getting this information for the first time, workforce is now required as maintenance as well. Your land and naval forces are deeply tied into your population and economy. You're going to need a large population and a stable economy to support a big army. This makes complete sense, honestly. War is costly and must be considered carefully. The workforce you're spending on troops and ships might also be needed to assure stable production of food or clothing, or manning trade ships to supply the various islands. Different unit types require different types of workforce, meaning more advanced units require you to first have enough population of one of the higher tiers. All of that is really, really important. You're not going to be able to just spam out. I remember there was someone on a Discord server somewhere that when they saw land combat coming back, they were so excited. They were like, oh my God, I'm going to build an accurate Roman legion with 4,800 units in it, with, the correct amount of cavalry and archers and legionnaires. You possibly could do that, but the strain on your economy is going to be absolutely absurd for something like that, to try to have a true Roman legion. I'm sure someone will do it just for the fun of it. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's not impossible, but you're going to have a very, very large, powerful economy and workforce, because it does take the exact amount of workforce for the number of units in the squad. A spearman unit needed 44 workforce because there were 44 spearmen in the little squad. So that's 44 workforce just for one unit. That's just for one unit right there. That's a lot of workforce. So if you want a true Roman legion with 4,800 units or 4,900 units, however many it was, you're going to need 4,800 extra workforce of different population tiers. So yeah, having a huge army is going to be very, very expensive. Now, how does this actually work in terms of, the workforce and how is it tied in? So units are always tied to a home island. Should you lose that home island, the game will automatically reassign those units to another island with free workforce of the appropriate type. If you have no free workforce anywhere, it will never put you into a workforce negative, is my understanding. You will never go into a workforce negative. If you do not have enough free workforce to sustain your troops, those troops will start losing health, aka deserting your army. So you have to maintain positive workforce or you're going to start losing your troops. Again, makes perfect sense. And they gave us a little reminder that time doesn't stop when you're fighting your giant epic battles. The game is still running. There is still an empire to manage. You still have to deal with, there might be a riot breaking out or a massive fire is engulfing half of your city while you're trying to conquer another island. Things are happening. So you're going to be juggling a lot of different stuff. So that's just a nice little overview right there of the combat system coming in Anno 117. Now they did do a really in-depth Twitch stream that's about an hour and a half long that I've only been able to have the time to sit down and watch parts of it. And I do plan on doing a deep dive into that Twitch stream to talk more about it and to go through everything they talk about it and pick it apart like it's the best charcuterie board I have ever seen, and I want to have and sample every little thing on there. So be on the lookout for that video coming out at some point. No guarantees when it's coming out. I'll get to it. And we will go through the deep dive on the combat and everything through that Twitch stream as well. So there you go, guys. There is the dev blog for combat and giving us some more information about what's coming with that system. Again, I know there's a ton more information in the Twitch stream, which I definitely want to get a video out for as soon as I can, as well as a video for some other stuff for Anno 117 that I have cooking in the pot for you guys, plus some other content as well. So with that, thank you so much for watching. What are your thoughts on the combat system? Let me know down below. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then, guys, take care.